The new Darkin is out, Zaahen. I'm a challenger coach and I want to break down for you guys what the new build will be and a decent idea of how to play this character in the jungle. Because right now you'll get rage baited by a lot of content, you'll get rage baited by 1k AD Zaahen or building lethality on Zaahen, and all of that stuff has to go out of the way once you watch this video, once you'll understand these things, and you'll be able to get a better idea of the character and have an edge at release over the other players who will just suck big donkey and have no idea about how a character is designed in League of Legends. So I will just leave this in the background. I'm playing on 200 ping from EU West, and it's simply that, yeah, we'll just leave this in the background and I'll schizo-rant about the build possibilities of this character. First of all, the way the Q works is that it has two casts. First you use this one auto attack, then you have to wait a bit. It's very similar to Camille, and then you can knock the target up. What this means is that you get two Shin effects into one ability, which makes Trinity Force already looking like a staple, and his base AD is 131 at level 18, which is pretty high. It's definitely on the upper end for base attack damage. It already looks like he was designed to build Trinity Force. Now, what's also very important is to understand his passive. He needs to stack this 12 times. The first part of Q grants 2 stacks, so technically you need 11 auto attacks, maybe 10 if you use a second cast of Q. And each ability has a chance to give you additional stacks. For example, if you hit the normal E, you get 1 stack. If you hit the edge of the E, you get 2 stacks. And if you hit the edge of the E on 2 players, you gain 4 stacks. Whenever you hit W, you also get 2 stacks, and R is also just 1 stack per player, which means that if you can AoE some melee characters in a team fight, you might be able to hit multiple abilities. Of course, as players get better and understand how Zaahen works, they will simply not stack in teamfights as hard to allow you to stack your passive easily, and the character seems already a little bit limited in teamfights because of the way it works. It's mostly single target focus, even though he has some decent AoE, and he wants to stack his passive, which is gonna be difficult against CC, mobility, just any type of kite. Against this type of comp, I'm already looking at a struggle, because I'm playing versus Ahri, Jhin and Zilean. So how am I going to work a little bit around this? I wanted to buy 3 long swords and a dagger here for Trinity Force. Unfortunately I went for 4 long swords, which is gonna stunt my build a bit and also ruin my tempo. I'm just trying to limit as a champion a bit. Doesn't matter. This Zaahen guy with Bork rush attempt is gonna try to invade me. I'm 200 ping, I miss my E. Just treat this as a background. We can need some abilities, some tooltips. And yeah, you have probably already seen that this passive can give you a really large amount of AD. But it comes as a cost, and even if you look at characters like Darius, they can get pretty much similar AD, but have bigger base damages, bigger ratios, ult reset through damage. Aatrox can get similar AD by just pressing a fucking button and then healing to full HP from 2 auto attacks. It does look crazy at first, but then you have to realize that yes, maybe the character isn't balanced in the best way. Like, maybe they should limit the amount of stacks on the passive you can get from W and E in the long run, as in it's a bit weird if you can just instantly stack your passive if people are just stacked like monkeys at an objective. But still, in many 1v1s that you will play with this character, you will realize, and even like 2v2s, teamfights, whatever, that you'll not be able to stack your passive and you will die before the revive can trigger. And that will be a way to cover the build, to learn how to play the character, similarly to how you would maybe play a Viego, where you wait a bit to actually go for your approach. because if you just go in blindly, try to frontline, simply not be able to get value out of your passive. So here we got this ultimate. That's pretty decent range on the AoE. It is essentially Volibear R. Instead of disabling towers and slowing and dealing more damage, you heal. Also Volibear gains HP. You heal for a bit. Also has inbuilt armor pen. We'll talk a bit about that later if you guys are curious about what I think of the kit. But for now, I'm just going to try to break down how we can itemize the character. Because there are a couple paths you can potentially take. And you'll see what I mean. Yeah, it just has an actual bigger AoE and does heal you a little bit. The ratio is pretty decent. I mean, Volibear R still has higher ratios and higher base damage, but the cooldown is also pretty low. 110, I think that might be a little too much because you can also use it as an escape, so even though the character probably isn't gonna build that much ability haste, I have a feeling that this ultimate cooldown could get a little higher, like at least 120, maybe 130. Because it is unstoppable, even though it's not like a good gap closer tool or something, just like you don't really use Volibear R for gap closing a lot of the time. It's still a powerful ability for fighting stuff. It can be strong in 1v1s, 2v2s to turn the tides, so to speak. And yeah, I'm building Trinity Force because the champion needs attack speed and movement speed to stick to targets and stack his passive. What you have to understand about Zaahen right away is that he's a very kiteable character. I mean, just think about it. All you have is this small dash on E, which by the way is on average, because of the way he has to itemize and looking at the base cooldown, twice as long as an average game. You just have to imagine it's kind of twice as long cooldown compared to Kayn Q or Aatrox E. So in that sense, it's really kiteable, because imagine if you had to play Kayn or Aatrox but the cooldown was kind of twice as long. I mean, that just sounds terrible. And the way he's gonna end up gap closing a bit and sticking to a target and having some variance is the W. But even if you land a long range W, the pull distance is pretty small. So it's like a really a shitty version of Pike Q in a lot of instances. It barely pulls stuff, so especially if you miss this ability, you'll be extremely kiteable. Just think about it. You could play Volibear and press Q on opponents and get a lot of movement speed, or you can use this micro dash and hope that you hit a W. It's really obvious to see that the character will be really kiteable, because you might not even be able to get your Q. I mean, you guys have all played Xin Zhao at least once in your life. You know how annoying it can be if you get CC'd as Xin Zhao to even land your Q knockup. But Xin Zhao has slows, he has a long range gap closer. So the champion doesn't have the slows and the long range gap closer, which already means that any type of CC can delay you from using this Q ability. And if you don't end up knocking people up, you will not deal damage, you will not really sustain anything, and you will get kited. So you heavily rely on using other tools, just like a character like Darius uses Strikebreaker, or a character like Garen uses Strikebreaker, maybe stuff like Ghost, Phase Rush, the Mass Plate. These are tools that you can use. And as I said, Trinity Force attack speed, movement speed, it's easy to proc, the base AD is good. Seems like a staple. It could be non-negotiable. We'll have to see how the character plays out and evolves. It's hard to get an opinion playing versus silver players on 200 ping while you also have 200 ping, okay? My next item that I will build here, which I believe it will be somewhat core, because you have to think of this character in the vein of Darius. It takes a long time to stack this passive, and you need to trigger the passive to also get the revive. It's about surviving for as long as you can, because if you don't die in the short fights, you will win the long fights in most cases anyway, because he just takes a lot of AD with his passive, as we explained. I think it scales from like 40% to 80% or something when you fully stack it, something along that line. Like right now I should be getting about 50% increased AD at level 9, almost 50% I think. maybe something like 50%, if I'm not mistaken. It's gonna be 2.3 per stack, and then it gets doubled when you fully stack it. And yeah, that is gonna give me about 100 AD, which is pretty crazy, but it just takes a long time to stack, especially in isolated 1v1s where you have to at least get about 7-8 auto decks or something like that. And just think about it, a lot of characters will simply kill you. This character is not tanky by itself. It has to get some sustain from Q. The R can maybe block like one ability and half its damage, but doesn't make you that much tankier from what I played. It's a bit hard to use, to be fair. It gave you a little bit of healing in 1v1, but 33% when it has to go through armor and it only hits one target. It's a really small heal, and then the Q is also kind of small heal, which scales with max health, which already indicates that this character has kind of a Juggernaut profile. So if you think of this character as a Juggernaut, as a champion similar to a Darius or something, then you are going to have a reasonable path to understand what you're supposed to do, what you are supposed to build. And Demon's Plate is going to be perfect to help me against getting kite, against Ahri, Jhin, Zilean, and against a lot of other characters in general. It's going to offer me some gap closing, because the champion itself doesn't actually have very good gap closing. And by the way, you can E on your feet on top of yourself instead of dashing a distance. Unlike most dashes like that, you actually can avoid dashing almost completely. I learned that in practice tool after this game. Played a couple matches yesterday on stream. Don't forget to check those out and maybe write something funny below. Let me know what you guys would like to see next. Here we just do a little spotlight on Zaahen. I want to make some content because it's fresh. It's gonna go nicely. This is a perfect Haribo champion, guys. You should understand if you know what I'm playing. It's a Juggernaut with some targeted CC and sustain with huge damage potential. Sign me the fuck up. Why not? I even like Darkness, you guys know I play fucking Aatrox so much, so... Not a big deal, I actually got an upcoming video for crazy Aatrox 1v9. Besides the point, after 24% Demon's Plate, you still want to give yourself as much time to be in the passive, and other tools. I also went for Swifties, so actually have some movement speed, because as I said, you cannot rely on only the E, which is a micro dash, to hit these ranged targets. You don't have the same movement speed that Aatrox gets from his ultimate and the reach he has with his Qs and knockups. And even that character has to build Voltaic Cyclosword to function nowadays. Which is also kind of a Juggernaut profile character, although not a pure Juggernaut, such as Darius. But the champion is different in the sense that he has to stack the passive to get value in teamfights and be able to trigger the revive. Now since I have this Deadman's Plate, you'll see that Deadman's Plate does decent damage anyway, and you don't lack power. You can still kill squishy opponents at the very least, and even tankier ones, if you end up stacking a bunch of AD from your passive. Of course there are AV ratios, and even the passive does scale with AD, as in if you buy more AD you get even more AD. That doesn't mean you should completely build Glass Cannon. This is what I think people will end up missing on this champ. You will actually have to build some tank items to unlock the potential. If you play in human elo or in competitive and you don't build some tank items into your late game transition, then you'll not be able to stack your passive into most team compositions, because they will just not let you. You'll at the very least need an insane amount of setup. That's why next you want items like Stas Gauge, Sundered Sky, at some point maybe Jaksho, you know, Kenny Rukern, Randuins. This is how you're gonna look to build this character. Pretty tanky builds. Of course Death Dance is also on the menu. But if you want to build super AD heavy, maybe you're thinking about some lethality or shit like, I don't know, Revenant Side or something. Just forget it, because you are simply fundamentally failing to understand what is the goal of the character. But yeah, as you see there, damage is not really that crazy. Here, I was thinking that I can stack my passive if I are in the tower and then I can revive and survive. So that was a pretty good play, a decent showcase of what the character can potentially do. And you also notice that once enemies kite you out, once you get chunked to like half HP, let's say, it's gonna be extremely difficult for Zaahen to go back and fight at half HP, because he doesn't really have the tools to stack his passive, so you'll probably have to disengage and go farm or base completely. Like, he mostly has to fight when he's full life. A lot of these bruiserish characters, when they're low HP, they can be strong, but Zaahen really doesn't benefit from being at low HP. He has no like missing health mechanics, missing health healing. He can turn a bit with R, and that's about it. When my R is on cooldown and I don't have passive stacks and I'm like half HP, the odds of me stacking the passive are gonna be very low, and keep in mind the passive also decays very quickly. It disappears after about 5 seconds and it decays in about a second. You're gonna lose all of your stacks, so it's very similar to Conqueror. If you guys think of how Conqueror functions, you have to get a lot of stacks and it disappears after 5 seconds and you kind of lose all the stacks almost instantly. And that's pretty much how Zaahen works. And you know, when you get kited in League of Legends, Conqueror stacks reset pretty easily, so if you have an idea of how Conqueror works in your games, it's pretty much the same thing. Next item here I think will be Standard Sky. The crit chance does work well. Not the crit chance, but you know, the crit, because if you stack your AD, you can go for some big crits. It's definitely somewhat synergistic. But I could even buy a Juggernaut right now, because character is not gonna lack the DPS to necessarily kill. We'll have to see against good players how much threat you're gonna have once you actually end up building certain things. And we can also talk a bit about the itemization as a whole. This is a full Schizo-Ren video. Unity Force, like I said, is probably gonna be non-negotiable first item, but you can also build Schreibaker first item. What you need on his first item is attack speed, movement speed, and a bit of durability. And the only two items that really qualify to be viable, and he can also use Tiamat Wave Clear to some extent even on jungle camps, but his AoE is completely fine, you don't need it. Although it's nice to clear waves, and Schreibaker can also be good to deal AoE damage in fights, because his auto attacks are gonna deal a lot of damage, scaling with AD, and Schreibaker, you know, the Tiamat AoE does not proc on hits, like it is for most characters, that can maybe deal some extra AoE damage through on hits, but Schreibaker is not gonna function with that. Well, Zaahen gets a lot of AD, so his Tiamat hurts quite a bit, which means that if you hit 2 or 3 targets with his high AD auto attacks, then you can get some nice extra damage in teamfights from Schreibaker, besides it being shown against ranged characters, so you can gap close properly. And you can Schreibaker during your E. I'll definitely post a lot of content with this champion, so make sure you sub, like, stay tuned if you want to unlock Zaahen's potential as fast as possible and not get, you know, fucking rage baited by noobs that are gonna more or less troll build with Spear of Shogun or some bullshit. This character is not really a caster. There's still a lot of evil things. Let's not focus on that. Like I said, you can go Schreibaker, and if you go Schreibaker, you also have access to Iceborne Gauntlet because you didn't go Trinity Force. If you combine Schreibaker with Iceborne Gauntlet, you can be incredibly sticky. And even get some Kai potential, buy yourself some time to stack the passive. That could definitely be a viable build that I see. Of course, you can build Marmortius if they're AP heavy and you feel like you need it. And if you play against a lot of melee characters, for your second item you could also consider stuff like Sunderscar Black Cleaver earlier, and not worry about a Damage Plate or an Iceborne Gauntlet. Hexplate could have some merit, like maybe if you're really far ahead, but it might be bad, just because of the way Hexplate functions. Although, who knows, maybe in some games it's gonna be the best way for you to stack your passive is just gonna be building Hexplate so you can have enough attack speed to right click and the movement speed, so you can just engage on the backline. You play against a full range team. And if you play against a full range team, you probably rely on your ultimate gap closing a little bit more, so I can see it being, at the very least, an option in some games. It's hard to tell. Because if it allows you to stack your passive in games where it's extremely hard to do it or almost impossible, then pretty much will be the best item for that spot. But as I said, 3-4 damage plate I think is going to be one of the core builds for most drafts that you're going to see in League of Legends. And then stuff like Sarah's Gauge, Standard Sky are going to work well because he has good base AD. These items are just synergistic with the characters, I already kind of explained it. And here I have Slow Resistance, Tenacity against Zillion, Jhin, Ahri, which is going to allow me to play the game a bit. Yes, these games are terrible quality, but we just need to see a bit of what Zaahen can do. Little spectate bug there. Anyways, what else, fellas? Like I said, you can have tank items like Force of Nature, it's gonna be a great one. Kenny Kruker and Jack Show. Probably not Spirit Visage. Randuin Desdance, Unending Despair. And you can also stack Black Cleaver extremely quickly because W is 2 stacks, even in AoE. The first part of Q is also 2 stacks. And in most games, probably gonna look for a... I mean, even if you go Shin, even if you go Stribaker, both can apply 2 stacks. So, essentially, what that means is if you buy Black Cleaver, you can W auto attack and instantly stack the Black Cleaver. And as you see, like, this is a clear example of how insanely kiteable Zaahen is, and how limited he is as a champion. And this is actually also a fight where I have my passive stacked and stuff, but it's a Juggernaut, auto attacker, doesn't have like much damage from his spells. Like, yeah, you could say, bro, but you went damage plate. Yeah, but I got 380 items and fucking Conqueror stacked and flowers, and I'm ahead of this guy, so if I were somewhat even, I would have the same thing. And this Zaahen guy that is sitting me right now is not even dealing like crazy DPS. This could be fucking Fiora, Darius, set, anything that fucking right clicks you, and it will much be the same kind of damage. And it just doesn't really end up mattering that much because, yes, I'm not that tanky, which means they can kill through me and then just get CC'd. And I'm playing on 200 ping, I can't really move my character. Maybe if I was playing on normal ping, I could chain my abilities properly together and get a nice ult. I could have potential to 1v3 them here. But that's just besides the point. It's simply... By the way, this is Swift play if you're wondering why the fucking enemy team has a goal lead when they're down 20 kills. This is just how the game mode works. It's supposed to get people to full build so they can try out their champions and stuff. It's a good mode, I guess. If you are really dog shit on something, you can still get to full build and see what numbers you can experiment in teamfights. Because this Zaahen also has 4 items after going down RSCS and dying 10 times, you know what I mean? But yeah, the way he's playing, he's never gonna be able to stack his passive in actual 5v5s, and even against 1v1s against burst champions, stuff like you know, Fiora Jax. He'll be naturally really good against this champ. And here's another showcase where I'm actually playing a pretty tanky build right now with a bunch of tenacity and slow resist. I mean, this is one of the tankiest builds you're gonna be able to ever fucking play on Zaahen. And I'm trying to hit my enemies, and Zilean completely misplayed this, and I had to flash on him just to have a chance. And I'm almost instantly popped in my revive. My Ari is not able to do that much. And I'm still pretty strong. Character is also a bit scaling. I'm not sure how strong Zaahen will perform in early game, although his early game seems to be fine. Especially from the jungle, like clear and everything is not a big deal, as you can watch from this game. But even from just playing a few games against silver players on 200 ping who cannot even kite me properly, it's still a really kiteable character, guys. It's still a really kiteable character that has clear weaknesses, and depending on how clunky, depending on how limited his kit is, he might be a 35% win rate champion at release, or he might be a 50% win rate champion at release, depending on how people end up playing versus him. It's really hard to tell, to predict how well he's going to do as a release, simply because there's a very big human factor when it comes to this champion. We also play on very high ping, so maybe it's a lot more nimble and fluid with his relatively high base MS, and perhaps the W is also easy to hit when you are playing on human ping. I cannot say for sure, but even while building these movements with tenacity items, I was still pretty kiteable. Either way, I think this type of build will be one of the common full builds for Zaahen, even though it's a little bit low on ability haste. It still delivers what I'm trying to do. Like here I'm just full tenacity, so I'm able to catch Zilean. Still, he misplayed, he didn't fucking use it really, I think. But then my passive expired. Like, this is actually kind of dream situation, as in I'm actually at a point where I got all of the tools to kind of get on my targets and get close. Enemy team isn't like extremely strong, they're on 4 items, while I'm on full build with boot upgrade. And that guy is not allowed to free hit me the whole time. While Zilean didn't fucking press ignite, didn't kite properly, didn't use Aurelia, didn't use ultimate. And just look how kiteable I am against probably 200 pink silver players. And I'm almost dead because my passive stacks fell off in the few seconds that I'm chasing the Jhin. And as I said, this is one of those champions that people do not think about it yet, but if you are low health, even half HP in a lot of instances, you cannot fight as Zaahen, because you'll not be able to stack your passive and you don't have enough durability to turn a fight. So he's gonna be one of those characters that once he's kited out a bit, it's really difficult to rejoin the fight. He might need an enchanter or something to be able to do it. Because yes, he might be able to contribute to the fight, the Q healing is still okay. I would say it's... I don't know what to compare it with. It's still like way worse sustained than Volibear or Yorick, so take what you will. Right now it's gonna give me like, I suppose, 400 HP, which at full build second HP items you could tell it's pretty lame. If you combine it with Thunder Sky and enemy team doesn't have healing reduction, you can get an okayish amount. Maybe you can use your ultimate, but that's about it. And you might be wondering, why does he have... Let's talk about this a bit as well. Why does he have armor pen? Because if he didn't have armor pen, his damage would have to be higher overall, which would make him nuke squishies a bit too hard without having to stack his passive. It's just easier to balance. It's good when Riot gives armor pen to a character like this, because it's just easier to balance. It's not making the character more overloaded, it's actually making the character less overloaded, because it simply, in most cases, makes it easier to balance. Because otherwise, he would either be too useless against melee characters, and he's supposed to be good against low-range melee champions because he has very little backline access, so he has to be able to hit like a fucking Ornn or Maokai or Darius or Set in a reasonable amount of time, or he's just not gonna be able to provide enough value. He has to be target agnostic. This is just a lever for balance, and the way it's spread on ult means that for most of the game it's gonna have like 10 to 20% pen, which isn't crazy. For example, Riot gave more pen for most of the game to Olaf or Yorick. Most people probably don't even fucking know right now that Yorick and Olaf shred your armor. Not even pen, they actually shred your armor so even teammates deal more damage, which is more valuable than this. Having armor pen on the kit of physical damage Juggernaut or even fighter is really not that crazy and common, and most champions, like I said, have armor reduction, which is stronger than pen. Unless you cannot meet that condition, but most of them can apply it very easily, like Jarvan, Vi, Wukong, Pantheon, Olaf, Yorick. It's many. I think having armor pen on the kit helps a character. Yeah, it's just another example where I kind of have low impact on the fight because my abilities don't deal much damage. Like, if you consider the... Even though I have armor pen, if you consider the armor, my abilities just don't end up dealing that much damage. Most of these characters' damage will end up being in auto attacks. Like, this is 400. And yes, I can stack passive, and all of these ratios are gonna go up by quite a lot. And even the R can have like a big impact, but all of it still has to go through some armor. And you're not gonna be able to build lethality or fucking Serilda, and I have 2 tank items, which, trust me, in most cases you will need, because this is somewhat decent showcase, because these people are also getting to full build. I'm not just playing against an actual real game where I'm up 2 fucking items at every stage, or like 3 items that you're gonna see in some clickbaity YouTube videos. And that showcases you that, yes, if you play teamfights against a late game carry and they nuke you, character is gonna be somewhat weak, and that's why he has to have armor pen to scale a bit better. He has to have these big numbers on passive, because the later the game goes, the more damage the enemy team purchases, the harder it's gonna be to stack your fucking passive. So it has to have a fat number in late game, just like Darius passive. You know, Darius passive, it actually doesn't give much AD for the first half of the game, but then once you get to turbo late game, it ramps up more and more, and each level gives you more AD than the previous level for Darius passive. And it's kind of a similar concept to the way this percentage works for Zaahen. Perhaps we have schizo-ranted enough, but I think you guys are gonna get the point. Will the character be broken? Or is he going to be clunky, kiteable, too hard to stack his passive, too hard to get his revive through? It's hard to tell. We'll have to see. Might he be a low elo stomper? I don't know. Might he be only good into specific comps? Will he be overpowered in certain comps? It's hard to say, because people just have to fundamentally realize that this champion is a Juggernaut and he has his own limitations. And if they would look, if Darius was released today and he had these numbers, 40% armor pen on passive, fucking 230 AD or something, is ulting like 2k through damage and resetting, they would say the same thing about Darius. That's all I can tell you. So G motherfucking G, thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out my links. And hopefully you enjoyed this schizo rant. G motherfucking G.